Welcome to Compass, finding spirituality in the everyday. My name is Ryan Dunn. In this episode, I'm joined by Dori, Grinenko, Baker, and Ana del Castillo for a heartfelt exploration of soulful practices and the deep wells of community connection and healing that we can each tap into, especially in uncertain times. Ana and Dori share personal rituals like grounding in nature and joyful body movement, and discuss how simple acts such as morning meditation, holy listening, and gathering in circles can combat loneliness, support mental health, and foster belonging across divides. Whether you're looking for inspiration to begin your own soulful practices or insights on building deeper relationships in your life, this conversation is a warm invitation to discover or draw from your own deep wells. If you appreciate conversations like this, we'd appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button on your podcast listening platform. And if you've already done that, then drop us a rating or review. A quick one is great. You can just say that you like Compass and appreciate what it does. Thanks so much. Our guests here and now are Dori Grinenko Baker and Ana del Castillo. Dori calls herself a spy for hope. She is a writer, facilitator, and thought leader who is passionate about helping people find meaning and live into their purpose. She's done a lot of educating around faith formation in young people, including inspiring yours truly in a seminary class a couple decades ago, which we didn't really discover until we reconnected for this podcast episode. And I'll tell you, her book, Girlfriend Theology, is a treasure for ministry practitioners and is widely shared in educational settings. Ana del Castillo is a healer who is innovating at the intersection of justice, politics, and healing. Ana served in the Biden-Harris administration as the Deputy Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility for the White House. And together, Ana and Dori help guide our own deep wells, a growing, diverse, and intergenerational collective from across religious and spiritual traditions. They help create resources and gatherings that work to provide care and support to the world, with a special emphasis on young adults, community organizers, and social change leaders. Ana is the executive director, and Dori is the chief visionary officer. So there's a lot for us to talk about and explore here with Ana and Dori. Let's get to the conversations here on Compass. We have just rolled through a soulful centering practice, feeling grounded and drawing ourselves into this space. So Dori and Ana, thank you so much for being here on the Compass podcast. I'll start with this question. Maybe this is a little leading as we've just gone through the soulful practice, but how goes it with your soul today? Dori, let's start with you.
Wow. These are difficult times to be grounded. And so I feel that my soul is good. I had some time in the dirt this morning with my plants. And so I'm grounded. And it's a constant effort to stay soulful. Effort's not the right word. Constant intention and intention.
Well, it's so good to be here with you, Ryan and Dori. And how is it with my soul today? I have just arrived to our virtual podcast space from a 1 mile run. I was like, I just got to get a quick one in. And DC, where I live, Washington, DC, is just vibrant green right now. It's that moment in spring where things are coming alive, and it's just this like mysterious green color that almost feels otherworldly. And so I'm feeling very grounded from time outside and the changing season, but just echoing so much of what Dori said of trying to stay centered in times that feel very uncertain.
Before I could even hit the record button, Dori said, well, we need to do a centering practice. Like, let's just pause down and concentrate on our souls for a moment. And you started our own deep wells with the expectations of drawing people into soulful practices for the purposes of bringing about healing and a sense of connection with one another and a greater well-being through that connection. So with that in mind, Anna, you talked about running, and maybe that's a soulful practice for you, but is there, or are there soulful practices that you personally invest in regularly that have impacted your emotional well-being? And Anna, maybe we'll just pick up with you. Maybe running is it.
Yes, running is definitely a soulful practice for me. Running feels connected to a series of soulful practices that I call joyful body movement. So I love to do physical fitness classes with friends. I love to do yoga with folks in the park. But really, I view the gift of moving my body as a soulful practice that helps me to balance my cortisol levels, to help me connect with how my body is feeling, help me connect with breath. So those are some soulful practices that I do on the daily and love. But I've just started doing morning meditation with my partner. So we did it to be accountability buddies because it's like first thing in the morning. Sometimes, 6:50 a.m. we're rolling out of bed, going to sit on the living room floor and just investing in 10 minutes. It's a 10-minute timer where we just sit and breathe together. And we've done it now for 1 week. So shouting at us for this little goal. And it has really made such a difference in how my day starts.
Within that meditation practice, is there a way that you keep your mind centered or present?
I will say starting a meditation practice after many months of taking a break, it is hard to keep the mind centered. And I have just been really trying to have a lot of compassion of when I kind of see my brain already going to my first Google Calendar invite. I just say a little mantra, which is be here now. So if I'm sitting on that pillow and thinking about what I want to have for breakfast, I just gently say, be here now. And that has been really helpful of just having like a couple of words to center me back in the present moment. And I actually get a lot of my mantras from Dori Baker, who I view as the queen of having some gentle mantras to just recenter and refocus.
Dori, is that something that you're purposeful in developing, or do they just kind of come out of you, these mantras?
Both and, yes, and my soulful practice runs the gamut of many different practices, but the one that starts me almost every day, whenever possible, is to get outside barefoot early and to see the sun. I actually open my window so that I'm seeing the sun without filter for the first few moments of the day, because I know that resets my serotonin levels. These are also practical. They're also physiological. So some might wonder what makes it a biohack and what makes it a spiritual practice. And for me, the difference is very subtle. And it's really just being mindful that we're connected to something more than ourselves. So when I go outside barefoot, I am connecting to the earth. I'm literally feeling my body is benefiting from the electromagnetic charge of the earth beneath my bare feet. And I'm also looking up into the sky and remembering my ancestors, my wise and loving ancestors who mostly came from across the Atlantic Ocean, as far as I know. And I am welcoming into my worldview that cloud of witnesses. Those people who have gifted my DNA, my biological DNA, but also I ask for their help in restoring and repairing some of the damage that's been done by those settlers who came from Northern Europe onto the land where I live, which is the land of the Monacan people. And so, I turn to my left and I turn to my right and I honor the Monacan people whose land I'm on. And I honor the people in the city to the right of me, which was a major market for the slave trade. And I remember their connectedness to my neighbors today. And that little practice, like sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 30 seconds. But that sets my day off into a way of realizing that any work for justice I do today is flowing through me. It's not about me. And it also relieves me from the burden of getting it right? Because I won't always get it right. So it's just a way of setting my intention.
We gathered here, here, quote unquote, within this space, this proverbial space, for the purpose of talking about soulful practices. I hear words like cortisol and biohacking. These are sciencey type terms, right? Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between these soulful practices and how that might affect our physical being as kind of these dual entities that many of us assume that we are?
Well, I'll start and then Anna, I'll let you finish. How's that?
Sounds great.
I don't say. We started our MD12s because we were alarmed by the mental health epidemic, especially as it is affecting young people. And I've spent my career focusing on vocation and helping young people come alive to purpose. Ryan, you were in a class of mine.
Way back, yep.
And I just realized that if people can't get out of bed in the morning, literally, if the anxiety and the depression is immobilizing, then trying to find meaning and purpose is not going to happen, right? And so I just kind of backed up and looked at the brain research that shows that soulful practices mitigate anxiety and depression. And this is coming from the work of neuropsychologist Lisa D. Miller, The Awakened Mind. And she also has a book about parenting, awakening the spiritual gifts of children, spiritual practices in children. Her words are spiritual. And we just changed that to the word soulful because we thought it was a bigger on-ramp, more accessible to people who might have been harmed by spiritual traditions or religious traditions. So we're holding both of those things at the same time. Brain research shows those of us with a spiritual tradition that we're at home with, maybe we've fought with it, maybe we've broken up with it, maybe we've reconciled with it. We shouldn't be the only ones who have access to these life-saving practices. So that's what we're about at R&D Wells, is to try to create easier on-ramps and access points for people who, for a very good reason, may have broken pathways to the spiritual traditions of their parents and grandparents' generations.
Yeah, just to pick up from there, we do use Dr. Lisa Miller's research, and we also really lean on the Surgeon General's work. So the previous Surgeon General did a lot of research on the epidemic of loneliness, and I live here in Washington, D.C., and used to work in the federal government, and I had the chance to actually hear Vivek speak about this epidemic of loneliness, and he spoke to a room full of federal government leaders about how important it is to have community and how important it is to take seriously our mental health, especially when it comes to how we gather with folks. And so I encourage everyone to read that report that came out, I think it was in 2024, but that's something that we feel as humans. You know, I'm not a scientist. I didn't go to medical school, but I do know that something changes in my body when I'm sitting in circle with people who are holding space for me. And I think that we're starting to see a lot of public health research coming out about the importance of having grounded community, of being with people. And so we view that as a soulful practice of sitting in circle. For some folks, it might be, no, I'm just going to go, grab some coffee with a friend and we're going to talk about reality TV. That's cool. We are encouraging people to take a more soulful orientation to gathering, to go a little bit deeper, but we just know that it is so important for humans to be together. And that to me really rang true when I read the Surgeon General's report.
Was starting our own deep wells for each of you a reaction to a felt loneliness in your own lives?
That's a really good question. I think a lot about the value of my own individual soulful practices, but that is so magnified when I share it with a friend, even as simple as Anna doing that morning meditation with her partner, having an accountability buddy. Yes, we all suffer from loneliness, and my life is spread around the nation. I have beautiful people all across the country, but I don't always have people in my backyard or right across the street. So the pandemic changed that for a lot of us. And after the pandemic, I started having fire pits in my backyard. I don't need a very big excuse at all. It could be a new moon. It could be All Souls Day. But I will call people up, and I might invite 7 and 2 might show. And that is exactly who's supposed to be there. But there is something, like Anna said, there is research to back this up, but I don't know the research. I don't need the research. I feel it in my body. That the morning after I've had a few women or men or people of all ages around my fire pit, I'm better. I'm better. I'm more available to be of some good in the world. My actual, my nervous system is more settled, and I'm less reactive and more able to respond with love and spaciousness.
I was just going to say to that question, I think I came into our own deep wells really by the ushering of Creator that led me to meet Dori Baker at a time when I was a proctor at Harvard University, which is a kind of fancy name for a residential assistant. So I was in grad school and I was doing research and living on campus supporting a group of 25 18-year-olds, 18 to 20-year-olds who were in their first year of college. And what I didn't realize was that that position was actually going to become my ministry. I was in divinity school studying how to be a chaplain. I was studying racial justice and healing, how to do spiritual care work. And I was meeting with so many young adults who were really struggling and who I think were leaving home for the first time, and they were given permission to talk about their loneliness or the ways that they viewed their body or the ways that they were getting language for the first time to understand their family trauma and their lineage. And I was sitting with them in these tiny little dorm rooms, and I was like, wow, they need more support. And our training is to refer them to mental health services at Harvard, which of course I did. That's such a beautiful place for them to get the care that they need, but there weren't enough counselors and therapists to support them. So they were like, okay, Anna, in 4 months I can go have this appointment, but what do I do on the day to day? And it goes back to what Dori said of how do we help people to get out of bed in the morning? Because the truth is most people don't have a therapist that's working with them every single day. That's a great resource, but people need tools to really understand what is emerging and what is surfacing for them, especially in those, in that age from 18 to 21. That's times when you're like, okay, I'm on my own for the first time. I didn't even know I could ask these questions, and I don't have anyone to really sit with me and just witness me. So that is around the time that I met Dori, and we just had this shared vision and shared desire to provide more support.
So Anna, I'm curious, in those conversations then, how do you bridge going from somebody saying, I'm feeling a little isolated, alienated, or lonely, to inviting them into a new soulful practice that may be completely, for lack of a better way of putting it, foreign to them or uncomfortable for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's something we think about a lot. And I think Dori has taught me so much about how to be really inclusive in soulful practices. So, I was raised in a very Christian household. I'm a preacher's kid. I, was very, very involved with the United Methodist Church. And I wasn't sitting in that dorm room saying, hey, can we pray together? Or let me teach you the Lord's Prayer. No shame to doing that. But I think our invitations to soulful practices, and when I was doing that work, I didn't even really have the language of soulful practices, but it was, okay, let me listen to you. Let's ask that question again. I just want you to sit with that question, and then inviting them to just pause and reflect for 60 seconds on a question and have someone just do holy listening with them, which is a practice that I would love for Dori to talk about. And then other things like, okay, I'm going to give you a couple of journaling prompts. Can you do those before the next time that we meet? Or it sounds like you really want to talk to your friend about this. Can y'all schedule a time in the next week to go for a walk around the river and just tell her how you're feeling, or tell her about this feeling that you've just shared with me. So those three practices, journaling, grabbing a friend to go for a walk in nature, and doing holy listening, those are soulful practices that are very simple and are not tied to any particular religion. It's just invitational. It's something that all of us can do, but people oftentimes just need a little nudge. But anyways, Dori, I would love for you to talk about holy listening because it has changed my life.
That's so sweet. Thank you. I also will just add that Anna's example of the dorm room is a great one. What we're trying to equip people to do is whenever they hold the mic, and that's a metaphor. Whenever they have the opportunity, whenever they're facilitating anything, these are spaces where the mindfulness movement has already crossed the superhighway, right? We already know that a moment of, deep breathing together, we can do that in a science classroom for all intents, anywhere. So what we're trying to do is broaden that movement and make it more inclusive of all the world's traditions, so that we're representing, and we're tethering these traditions to their context by writing about them in ways that come from the people who are from those contexts, right? Whether that's Jewish or Muslim or Christian or earth-based traditions. But the idea is there's a whole lot more out there than just breathing together. So if you're facilitating a freshman orientation, you can do a soulful practice. That might have to do with mingling around the room and touching base with a group of 2 people or 3 people and answering a question that just brings your body to life. A simple question like, tell me about the best vacation you ever went on in your life, or what's your favorite food from your family of origin. Like, those things get our bodies, our life force rises to the surface, and we can be soulful with one another and then move back into, okay, what is the work that we have to do here? But we're really excited about looking for places on campuses, in boardrooms, in corporations, where we can infuse the day with little soulful practices. In Christian language, that would be prayer without ceasing, and in Christian language, it would be the priesthood of all believers. But we're seeking to make those 2 invitations more inclusive. Like, what does it look like to lead a soulful moment in the midst of a tragedy, in the midst of, this goes way back. I remember when the Boston Marathon explosions happened. I remember thinking, what would it be like if the young people there had some practices in their back pocket? So while the EMTs are doing their work, there are movement chaplains leading folks in practices that can calm us and make us be available for the next moment. So there's lots of good work on movement chaplaincy going on, and we've been learning from our colleagues in those spaces about how to just do these practices, how to equip people so these practices are at their fingertip.
Are there practices that you have noticed that are conducive to bringing people together from maybe across polarized spaces?
Yeah, so we'll talk about holy listening, and then I'll let Anna tell a few stories about when we've seen that happen. So holy listening is a practice that, just goes way, way back to Methodist roots for me, and some of the work that I did in my early part of my career. But, just opening someone to tell a story about a time when. And as we listen to that person for just 2 minutes, I've done this in the midst of worship on a Sunday morning, right in the middle of my sermon. I've stopped the sermon. It was Pentecost. And I just said, okay, for 2 minutes, turn to someone and tell a story about a time when, fill in the blank what you want that story to be about, set a timer. And when you're listening, you are only listening. And I usually say, listen as if you may see the Holy One show up in the face of the person that you're listening to. Like, allow yourself to be surprised, or just pretend, even if you can't get yourself to that place, pretend that the Holy One is going to be there for you for a moment, or with you for a moment. And then you take turns. So each one gets to listen and each one gets to speak. And in that example of doing that on a Sunday morning in the middle of worship, someone came up to me afterwards and said they had been paired themselves with a person whose baptism they had been present at. It was an older person and a younger person. Okay. And the younger person was about to be confirmed. And they had these 2 minutes together, these 4 minutes together, that changed the trajectory of the next few weeks for them. And so there's always just this possibility that, 2 minutes of holy listening to someone can change a life. So we expand. That's a very easy, simple practice. But we also have some deep dive practices. And one of those is theological reflection around shared story. And we did that recently. And I'll let Anna tell that story, because that was a moment when all of the politics that are alive in our bodies got brought into the room, and we got to dive deep.
Yeah, so this practice, and you can find this on our website, but it's called Live to Tell. And it is a soulful practice that Dori really birthed into the world, but it is it kind of takes holy listening into a deeper practice where you have someone share a story that they've prepared. It's usually, a 2 to 3 minute read about a different topic. So I think this one we asked, talk about a time when you had to move through difficulty. And that person gets the opportunity to read a story in a circle of people. And the first step of that live model is to listen. And so folks just listen, they take it in. But I've done live before, and as a storyteller, it's so sacred to have a circle just listen to you with no expectations, no fixing things, no trying to give you advice, but just listening. And then we move through some other steps of theological reflection, surfacing questions that come up for folks, surfacing emotions and feelings. But in this particular time, we were leading a retreat at beautiful Lake Tahoe, and this was a very intergenerational group from across the United States. So we had, I think our elder was in their 70s and our youngest person was 22. Cool. And most of the folks there didn't know each other. So they were kind of coming by invitation of Dori and Anna, sort of us bringing our people together. And one of my dear friends who I've met in my own activist journey here in Washington, D.C., she and I have done a lot of work together on calling for peace in Gaza and calling for an end of violence there. And she is a young Jewish woman, and she read her story of her own personal loss and also the loss that has come, the loss and the gain that has come from her activism. And she read this story, and it was very clear that she has been pushing for peace in Gaza and an end of violence, and really holding the Israeli government accountable. And so reading a story like that, and as facilitators, you never know how that's going to land in a room, because people had very different thoughts about Israel-Palestine, and we didn't even know everyone's view on what's happening there. But we do know that that's can be a very divisive topic. And by the end of this person going through the live model, we had people in tears. We had mamas like mothering this person. We had someone who was like, I'm ordering a cake to celebrate your brave decision. And we really did. That night we had a celebration party to celebrate this person and the brave decision that they had made. And so, I just have chills thinking about what that room felt like, because that could happen in a way that wasn't a soulfully led practice, and it could have divided a room. It could have led people to end relationships. It could have caused a lot of harm. But we really saw that soulful practice bringing this intergenerational group together in a way that was healing, I want to say for all of us, but really healing for the person who shared her story.
That group was also racially diverse and religiously diverse. And so what happened on that day, we were not far out from the encampments on campuses last spring. We were in July. Everything's still it is still on fire in many of our realities, right? We weren't far out from all of that, but in this space that was carefully created and tended soulfully, there was just a little more room made for us to show up for each other, no matter how we've been raised, right, to show up in that moment. There was a little more spaciousness. And so that's what we want to see more of happen. And we believe these deeper dives, when people can be together for 2 days, sharing soulful practices, we kind of feel like that's what the world needs right now. That we need to be sharing across our faith traditions that have so much wisdom and so much ancient reservoir, deep wells. But how can we not draw only from our own, but make space to draw mutually from one another's and receive that beautiful flow that was happening in that space that day? But there's one other thing that happened in that retreat that was similarly like a bridging moment. I'm going to let Anna talk about that one too.
Yeah, we love to storytell, Ryan. So we're going to tell you another story.
Bring it.
So this practice I love, and I know that you've had the incredible Tamis Spencer-Helms on your podcast before. They are a dear friend of ours and also the theologian in residence for our own Deep Wells. And Tamis, in collaboration with the poet Nick George, who's also a member of our collective, created a soulful practice and methodology called mixtape, rest mixtape. And so I won't go too much into it because folks can just listen to your other podcast episode.
Link in the show notes. We got it.
Yes, for sure. But what is so beautiful, or what was so beautiful about this practice at Tahoe was that you had two Black teachers and facilitators talking about hip hop and the history of chattel slavery in the United States of America to a room that had a lot of older white folks from Mississippi, from southern states, who I just heard them say, this is the first time I've been invited into a conversation like this. This is the first time that I've actually sat down and listened to the lyrics of Kendrick Lamar, or have been asked a question about my relationship to hip hop or my knowledge of hip hop. And so, you know, I've done a lot of inclusion and equity trainings, and I've never seen something as like inviting in as that practice, where you saw older white folks being invited into this conversation about our shared experience of the grief and like detriments of the history of our country. And so that to me felt so healing and unifying and just beautiful. So Dori, I don't know if I missed anything on that beautiful mixtape day, but you feel free to fill in.
I think you got it. It reversed the commute that we're accustomed to making, and that is a joy to behold and be part of the cultural commute.
And it sounds like this is an organized event. How might people who are wanting to have this kind of sharing or listening experience, how might you imagine they initiate something like this or organically?
I'll take that one because,
cool.
I mean, obviously our own Deep Wells, we are here for everyone. We always share resources. We want folks to get connected with us because our collective of practitioners and facilitators feel really passionate about making sure that people know that they can do this too. I think people just need a little bit of invitation to say, I'm thinking about my sister. I told her that I'm a part of a really active women's circle where we meet monthly and have been supporting each other for 4 years. She came to one of our retreats and now she's hosting her own women's circle, So I think sometimes people just need to see it and need to be invited to say, you are a soulful human being. It doesn't take having a Master of Divinity or being an ordained minister or having invested thousands of dollars in a spiritual education. We are human beings with so much wisdom. And so I would say to anyone listening, has this sparked any ideas for you of maybe a deeper way that you want to connect with your neighbor or your friend or your partner? And if you need a thought partner, please contact us. We would love to talk to you, but I just think people need permission to tap into the beautiful wisdom that's already in them.
Start really small. So yeah, we have the Live to Tell podcast and the book Girlfriend Theology, which describe that deep dive method. But there are so many little easy ways. I'll tell a quick story. My daughter, who lives in LA, she's in her late 20s and was invited to a birthday brunch the other day. And, everybody's around in their own little separate conversations. And she dings the glass and says, hey, let's all tell a story about how we know Desi and why we love her. And all of a sudden, this is Priya Parker magic, right? All of a sudden, it's changed from a place where we all go away with our own private conversations to this moment where we opened our hearts and got a little roomier in there. And we got to celebrate Desi and our love in a more collective, communal, inclusive way. So this is not rocket science. Humans have always known how to do it. It just takes giving people a little bit of confidence and the nudge. The nudge is our best gift, right? I'm going to share, Anna had mentioned earlier mantras. I'm going to share one other little practice that's just so easy. It's such an easy on-ramp. Find something that is going to happen all through your day, whether that's when you drink water or when you water in or water out, or when you see a bird. I have a mantra. When I see a bird, I say to myself, birds make me happy. And guess what? In that moment of shining a little spotlight and being reminded that birds make me happy, I'm a little happier. I'm a little less tied up. I'm a little less closed and concerned about whatever it was that was bothering me be that in my personal life or be that in the world as we see it unraveling before us. So yeah, I love that. I call it tiny arrows of love, but just figure out what your arrow is. It's tied to the ancient Christian practice of target prayers, where people would pray the Jesus prayer. If they woke up anxious in the middle of the night, Lord, in your mercy, hear my prayer. It can be as simple as that, or as creative as you want it to be, with whatever it is that makes you happy or that slows you down. We have a practice called May You Never Thirst that we do collectively when we fill our water bottles in the morning at a retreat, or as we sit down to dinner. We share with one another a reflection on the gift of clean, fresh water and how lucky we are to be receiving it. We turn that into a soulful practice.
Thanks for listing those, Dori. That makes me just want to drop one, or a question that I've been sitting with. And I think, Ryan, this kind of ties up our work in general. I live in DC. I'm a young adult in my late 20s. I spend time with a lot of young adults who are just trying to figure it out. Like, we're trying to figure out what we want to do in the world, what our world is going to look like. And the question that I'm sitting with, that I want to invite people into through the work that we're doing at our own Deep Wells, is asking, who are you? Like, who are you? Not what do you do, what's your dream job, but who are you? And I think if we can all help each other to answer that question, or even just show curiosity by saying, like, hey, who are you? We would have a much more beautiful, safe, and flourishing world.
That's great, Anna. Someone actually asked me that at the end of the funeral the other day. They came up to me and said, who are you? And it was such a beautiful question to be asked. So thank you for underlining that.
And for wrapping us up so well. We've talked about the on-ramps that people might find into some of these soulful practices. An on-ramp to get to know more about what Anna and Dori are up to would be our own Deep Wells website, correct?
Check us out on Instagram, too. We're always sharing fun content. And subscribe to our newsletter.
Cool. And Anna, you had mentioned having a podcast. You want to drop the name of that podcast?
Yeah, so I've been supporting two friends who are putting out a podcast called the Soulful Parenting and Caregiving Podcast. And I will also plug an incredible podcast that Dori and our friend Alejandra Salemi are co-hosting called the Live to Tell Podcast. And you can find both of these on Spotify.
All right. To explore more practices and resources or connect with practitioners, visit the Our Own Deep Wells website and discover ways to nurture soulful connection in every part of your life. If you'd like to dive deeper into anything that we've talked about or explore more episodes, be sure to visit our website at umc.org/compass. You'll find episode notes, resources, and a growing library of conversations just as meaningful as this one. We're grateful to the team at United Methodist Communications for making this podcast possible and helping us bring these important stories to you. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to Compass wherever you get your podcasts. And if you found something meaningful here today, we'd really appreciate it if you rated and reviewed the show. It helps others find us and be a part of the conversation too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Peace.